Welcome back to the Argentina Project podcast here at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars Latin American Program. I'm Benjamin Gedan. I direct the Argentina Project. We're talking about the historic failure in the Argentine Senate to approve legislation that would have legalized abortion in Argentina. The vote took place in the very early hours of Thursday, October 9th, and went down to the wire with a great deal of uncertainty throughout as to how it would play out. Ultimately, the vote failed, 31 in favor, 38 against. Abortion, of course, is very rare in Latin America, legal only in Uruguay and in Cuba. And Argentina obviously would have been a bellwether and a very significant advance for the women's rights movement regionally. Things went in a different direction. We're here with Nicolás Saldías, a researcher at the Wilson Center, who has written recently, before the vote, about the implications of this issue for President Mauricio Macri. President Macri, of course, a center-right president of Argentina who personally opposes abortion rights, but promoted a legislative debate on the issue and promised to sign legislation if it passed and not to use his veto. Now that it has failed, Nicolás, tell me, what are the implications for the president and how's he reacting?
So the vote was not passed by the Senate, even though it was passed by the Congress. And the vote was not popular amongst his own party within the Senate as well. So they also rejected it. So that highlights that the Cambiemos coalition very much is a coalition. It is a diverse coalition that includes progressives as well as conservatives inside of it. According to the data, 17 Cambiemos senators voted against it and 8 voted in favor. So that suggests that the party is generally a center-right party, but it does have progressive elements. For Macri, I think that the failure of the vote to go through, although personally he's against it, I think it will have consequences for him that will reinforce his base with conservative voters, especially in the interior, but it may cost him some support in the cities like Buenos Aires and Santa Fe, which are generally more liberal and progressive when it comes to these issues. So it's a balancing act to see how this will turn out for him.
And I recall in the lower house vote that took place in June, where abortion rights were approved by a narrow margin, it also split the Cambiemos movement. In that case, you had 65 votes opposed and 42 votes in favor, so showing the division throughout the process.
Yeah, correct. So what Macri did that was kind of unique on this issue is that he allowed his deputies to vote as they saw fit ideologically. And he said that this is a personal decision and that he's not going to impose his personal preferences on the party. And that, I think, in Argentine politics is kind of novel, considering that, you know, normally parties do whip pretty closely to what the president's preferences are. And on top of that, Macri, who is a center-right president, distinguished himself from the center-left president, Cristina Kirchner, by actually allowing the vote to go through. During her 8 years as president, she actually actively subverted attempts to get the law through the Congress and Senate. So I think this is an interesting case study almost of Argentine party politics in the age of Cambiemos that I think will be fruitful for future research.
Let's talk about President Mauricio Macri's chief rival and predecessor, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. As you mentioned, she was an opponent of abortion rights throughout her 2 terms as president. The speech last night or early this morning that I know you listened to reflected a bit of the transformation in her views on this. What did you read in her remarks in terms of how she's framing the issue and what it means for her potential presidential candidacy next year?
So during her remarks, she talked about the emergence of the feminist movement inside Argentina. She was saying that in 2015, the Ni Una Menos movement was a sort of wake-up call for her. And she was saying that she's increasingly convinced by feminist critiques and arguments regarding these issues, not only abortion, but also more ideologically charged issues. And she was very actively using terms like the patriarchy, for example, which does suggest that she's become a lot more progressive than she used to be. And she was also saying that the vote is a result of the movement, the feminist movement, not Macri, basically. And she's trying to latch on very strongly to a more social justice-oriented movement.
Now let's look at the more mainstream traditional parentists. I mean, do they see this as a potentially winning issue? Obviously, look, it didn't pass, but we've seen a real evolution of public opinion in Argentina on the subject. And even within the great sort of sense of disappointment in the women's rights movement right now, I think the direction seems clear of where even, you know, relatively conservative Catholic country is headed on this charged, divisive issue.
Yes. While it is likely that the abortion will be legalized in the country within the next generation, if not earlier, within Peronismo, I would say that there is a division. For example, yesterday, after Cristina spoke, another potential presidential candidate, Pichetto, who is now the head of the Senate Peronists, said he was in favor of the legalization, but he was more classical in his defense of it. He was more defending the secularized state instead of a more progressive view as to why the abortion should be done. And he also justified it on the lines along public health, which is also very different. So it's a more bounded defense of abortion. The other presidential candidate, Urtubey, for example, potential presidential candidate from Salta, a very conservative province in the country, has come out against it. So this suggests that within Peronismo, like within Cambiemos, there is divisions. And unlike the United States, like I wrote in the blog post, the issue of abortion has no clear party line. And so it's not very clear how this is actually going to affect presidential candidates within Peronism. And it will be interesting to see as well, like I said, how this will affect Cambiemos, because there are very serious divisions within Cambiemos. For example, Maria Eugenia Vidal, who is the governor of the province of Buenos Aires, has been very vocal in opposition to abortion. And this will be, again, an issue that will come back up in 2019 and may affect the outcome of the election.
As was the Cambiemos vice president, as was the Senator Esteban Bullrich, who we've had here at the Wilson Center, who's a prominent, up-and-coming, former education minister, member of the President's Coalition. Interestingly, though, we have produced a Q&A with Directorio Legislativo, an analyst from an Argentine NGO that studies the Argentine Congress, who pointed to a previous example, and that was marriage equality, where he said it was a case where, again, party discipline was broken, folks voted based on what they believed, and it didn't have any lasting ruptures in terms of any of the coalitions, and they sort of moved on back to votes where more or less there was party line behavior. Do you see that analysis as sound and that fundamentally this won't shift the Cambiemos world?
I don't know if that is necessarily true in this case, because abortion is much more charged. Even in the United States, if you follow the evolution of abortion in this country, you see that parties eventually harden in their positions. The reason why is because unlike equality in marriage, you are talking about many people seeing the act of abortion itself as potentially murder. So this is a very highly ideologically charged debate. And not only that, but you also have a very consistent and very strong conservative Catholic Church inside Argentina that has a lot of power. And they won this time. It will be very interesting to see how that evolves, especially if Cambiemos does win in 2019. Because if Cambiemos wins in 2019, it is probable that the Governor Vidal will have even more power within the coalition, because she will be probably pushing very strong in favor of Macri.
That's right. Of course, the church opposed marriage equality as well, and in that case, it lost the fight in Argentina, which has since then permitted same-sex marriage. Nicolás Saldías, a researcher here at the Wilson Center's Latin American program and a wonderful analyst of these and other issues in the Southern Cone. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Today's episode was produced, edited, and engineered by Sam Aladef. You can find previous episodes of the Argentina Project's podcast on SoundCloud.